Hey, thanks for joining us, everybody who's watching right now. We're doing the special edition of Autoline. We're going to be talking about the Geneva Auto Show, how it was canceled by the coronavirus, what that might mean for auto shows going forward. And we're going to talk about some of the cars that have come out at that show because automakers are unveiling them, even though they're not able to do it live at Geneva. And joining me right now is Stephanie Brinley, an analyst with IHS Markit. And Stephanie, I got to ask you right off the bat, what do you think about the show getting canceled? What kind of ramifications does that have for the industry?
It's a really interesting event, and it's unprecedented. I don't think we've ever canceled an auto show like this before, certainly not for this reason. And it happens at a time, it overlays where automakers were already concerned about what value they were getting out of being at the auto show. And so they were forced kind of to pivot very quickly in a different way. And it could have impacts on future auto shows in that if they've decided that this option worked well for them, they may rethink some of their auto show media reveals. And I want to be clear, too, that that doesn't necessarily mean they won't participate in auto shows from a consumer's perspective.
Yeah. Hey, we should let all the audience know if you want to submit questions, you're in the chat room. You can just type them in. We'll be monitoring that, and we'll try to get to as many of your questions as we can. But Steph, let's go back to Geneva. How do you think this is going to go, unveiling cars online? I think it's probably okay for us in the media, but I'm not so sure about the general public.
I'm not sure about the general public. I mean, there's still, even I was watching a lot of the videos myself this morning, the online reveals. You do miss a little bit of the vibe, right? I mean, part of it is just being there, touching the car, seeing the car, talking to the people, and that you don't get when you're online. Now, you have to remember, too, when you look at a media reveal for something like the BMW i4 Concept, the people coming in to see the Geneva show get to see it, but when you do it online, you're reaching a much bigger audience. Globally, people can see it. That's not the same as being in a show, but you do have access to more people.
Okay, you raised the issue of the i4. What do you think of that car?
I'm pleased, actually. I'm looking forward to seeing it, in person. I'm really looking forward to seeing the production version. Excited to see what they're doing with the curved LED screen and their new infotainment graphics. And on the outside, I like it. I like that it's more car than SUV. I tend to be a car owner anyway, so that appeals to me too. And I do like the way that this direction of this vehicle.
Yeah, but what everybody's talking about, we're looking at the interior right now, as you point out, those OLED screens. I think this is very clean and modern looking. But what everyone's talking about is the snout on the front end of that thing.
It's a big snout, concept car, right? So everything gets scaled back just a little bit. So I do think that that's a bit of a big nose, but I think that it'll come down to something that looks much more attractive on the road. That is a little bit strong for a production car.
But this is a concept for an electric, right?
That is correct.
Why would you put a radiator grill on the front of a car that doesn't need one?
It's a little bit of just making sure that it feels more comfortable. People still don't quite understand fully about electrics, right? We think we do because we're kind of in the industry and we're watching these things very closely. But that doesn't mean that all consumers do. And you do also need to speak to them as well. And I would guess that that's kind of where that's coming from.
Okay, well, we'll see how it goes. I think the car with any electric car with any semblance of a grill are going to look very old-fashioned in just a couple of years.
That could be, depending on how many electrics and how much of the market they tend to be in the next couple of years. Remember, we'll still have a lot of ICE vehicles for the next 10, 15 years. So a grill isn't going to look totally strange for a long time. Back to the interior, though, that might be the most modern and fresh BMW interior we've ever seen, right?
Yeah, really. I mean, boy, it's, devoid of switches and levers and knobs and buttons and all that, as they put more and more of that capability into the screen itself. So I like the interior a whole lot.
I do. And it still keeps a very horizontal BMW attitude, too, toward their interiors. So it's well done.
We've got a question in here from one of the viewers, David Grisco. He wants to know, how do you believe current events, I think he's really talking about the coronavirus, is going to impact vehicle sales in the U.S. and the rest of the world?
Jury's still a little bit out on that. That's something that here at IHS Markit that we're looking at very, very closely. It changes by the minute. We're starting to see some initial results from February. It looks like the U.S. sales haven't been maybe impacted too much yet. It'll come down to supply down the road, but we don't have an estimate to give you right now.
Yeah, and U.S. Average Guy wrote in to say, has there been any talk of other auto shows being canceled at this point?
You know, the New York Auto Show put out a note today saying that they're planning to go forward as planned. They're going to go forward as planned unless something changes. At the moment, they have no intention of canceling. Before Geneva was canceled, the Beijing Motor Show was moved to a new date, which hasn't been decided yet. That one made a lot more sense given the proximity to the coronavirus start. Beijing said they would delay their show several weeks ago.
Okay. Brian Young wants to know, what are your thoughts about the coronavirus impacting the Detroit Auto Show in June?
You know, we're going to have to wait and see. I mean, you know, we'll see what New York does. We have to see. We don't know. I don't know. I'm not in the business of predicting virus outbreaks and how rapidly or how bad it'll be for the states. So honestly, we're just going to have to wait and see how the next couple of weeks and months will unfold.
You know, I think we can learn something from China. Things have been going on there for a little over 2 months. Looks like the number of cases is declining. Looks like the country is slowly getting back to work. So that would be sort of my guess as to any impact in the U.S. Probably last for a couple of months, and then hopefully it starts to blow over.
Hopefully. You know, what's a little bit interesting is watching the economic impact over the next couple of months. You know, we've got all industries really being impacted. You know, think about all the airplane industry, right? The airline industry, that people aren't moving. Think about supply chain and all of China really not doing a lot for a couple of weeks. There's economic ramifications that are going to take the first half, maybe first 3 quarters to really see.
Hey, look, we've also got Bob Gritzinger from Ward's Intelligence on the line, so to speak. Let's bring him in on this discussion. Hello, Roberto.
Interesting to be aboard this streaming project here. It's been an interesting conversation already.
So, Bob, what's your take? You know, the impact on the industry of having to cancel auto shows because of the coronavirus.
Well, I was in the air coming back from Frankfurt and landed in Detroit and found out that the Geneva show was canceled. So that really didn't surprise me. As we know, you know, like any international show, but especially Geneva, that one brings in people from all over the world, potentially bringing in the virus. But for sure, if there was kind of an outbreak there, taking it back out all over the world. And so, you know, it didn't surprise me that they decided that they should put that one on hold. Looking ahead, you know, New York, we'll see how that goes. It's interesting that even events as large as the Olympics in Tokyo are being, you know, looked at, and at this point saying they're going forward, but all these events could be impacted.
And I think it's important to note too with the Geneva show that it was a result of a decision by the Swiss government to ban events. Right. So it wasn't necessarily Geneva Auto Show making that call. They may or may not have made that call. I'm not judging or predicting what they would have done. Right. But it was a result of a government decision, and they had no choice but to follow. I have no idea if we're going to come to that space here in the States.
Yeah, at this point, I wouldn't say the government in the U.S. would take any kind of action like that.
Bob, you saw us talking earlier about the BMW i4.
Right.
The interior. Jenna Serker wrote in to say the interior is a little bit simplistic for his taste. But what do you think about that car?
I mean, that's somewhat where things are going. I'm looking at it up on the screen as I sort of glance away here on a second screen, and that whole single wide screen like that we've seen already in their competitor Mercedes-Benz with the MBUX system. So that doesn't surprise me. I think we'll see a lot more clean interiors like this, especially in electrified vehicles. You guys were talking about the snout on that, and something that didn't get mentioned is that what they're telegraphing there and what they're building into that are all of the sensors that would handle the semi-autonomous driving functions. So you can put some really big sensors in a big snout like that.
Yeah, I suppose. Look, I know why they're really doing it, because BMW's styling identity is so much hinging on that twin kidney grille.
Oh,
and
for
they
sure.
just don't want to give it up. Personally, and I'm not trying to put the designers down, I think that's lazy design. If you've got to rely on your grille to depict what the brand is all about, you better start figuring something else out. But Stephanie, let's get you back in. Let's go back to another car that was there. And I think we ought to go right to the Hyundai prophecy, because this is a vision for a future electric vehicle. And it doesn't look anything like that BMW i4.
Yeah, it kind of goes the other way back around. I feel like I'm seeing an old Nissan Z Coupe in there somewhere.
That's right.
On the side, I feel like I'm seeing the Mercedes-Benz CLS from a few years ago. I was surprised to see this. Hyundai has done several pretty terrific concepts over the years. And this one, though, feels out of the gate, to me, feels a little dated.
Oh, interesting. Bob, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm trying to recall somebody online somewhere commented that it looked like a Ford Probe concept from somewhere back in time, 1990s. Yeah, so kind of dated. I mean, I think they're trying to pick up that CLS look and that kind of four-door coupe look, but I'm not so sure if it doesn't fall into, Mitsubishi Mirage area, which is troubling.
I do like that these two concept cars are cars and not utility vehicles.
I was just going to ask you that. Are you surprised they're doing a sedan and not a crossover?
Well, crossovers are where people are going right now, and where they have been for quite a while. But there are still people who want sedans. You do still have to address that. And we look at the two shapes of these vehicles. You can be much more expressive with sedan styling than you can with utility vehicle styling for the most part. So it makes sense to me to see some sedans out there as well. It's not quite dead sedan market yet. It's just different than it has been.
Yeah, a lot smaller, but still significant. Yeah. Hey, Bob, I didn't see any pictures of the interior of this concept from Hyundai, but they claim that it's using a joystick. This is the second time they've shown a concept car with a joystick. And I've always said, if you start seeing recurring themes in concept cars, it's headed to production. But what do you think?
Well, I'm looking at something that looks like it's the interior out on another website, and it looks like it's almost like handles or something as opposed to a joystick. But it's a center, couple handles, one on either side, and maybe you control the vehicle that way as though you're driving a tank or something, right?
Stephanie, what do you think? Joysticks in our future in our cars?
I'm not going to predict that one. I wonder how precise the control is, but people can get used to all sorts of things that we don't expect.
Think of who you're potentially selling this car to. It's the entire generation that grew up on joysticks and playing video games. So yeah.
Full disclosure, not a great video.
Not us. Yeah.
Hey, we've got another question coming in from David Grisco, and I want to offer that to anybody who's watching right now. You can jump in the chat room. We'll try to get to your questions. But as you see, it's up on the screen now. What are your thoughts on the battery supplier change on Tesla vehicles going from cylindrical shapes to prismatic? And our batteries now viewed as a commodity. Steph, why don't you take a stab at that?
I'm going to say they're going to have to eventually be a commodity. I mean, that's just the way that the power, it's going to move. I think the magic in batteries has been in thermal management. It's been power delivery, and it's been how you can get that power out of it more so than the shape of it. So there's certainly opportunity for batteries to become a commodity.
Bob, you follow all this electric stuff. Cylindrical or prismatic? Which way do you think they're going to go?
The battery part is somewhere outside of what I've been studying lately. I'm much more interested in what Tesla is doing with motors and they have now incorporated two different types of motors. So that changes part of the equation. But really, it's all about, with batteries, the chemistry and getting the heat out, right? You're trying to charge it quickly, but as a commodity, absolutely, it feels like that's where Tesla is trying to go with its giga battery factories, and trying to make sure that they have that supply and that it's standardized.
What I'd like to know is why Tesla made the change. I'll say this: almost no other automaker has gone with the cylindrical shape. Almost everyone's going with prismatic, because they tell me from a packaging standpoint, they're much easier to package. When you have a whole bunch of different cylinders next to each other, there's gaps in them, and it could actually hurt you from a energy density standpoint at the pack level. But I wonder too, did Tesla say, geez, we need more batteries, and nobody else was willing to make cylindrical ones? And did they go with prismatic that way?
That could be, or they could have gone cylindrical to begin with because that was more available at the time.
Yeah.
Well, they went cylindrical because, everyone thought scale is so important, and there were more cylindrical lithium ion batteries being made than any other. I mean, there were millions and millions and millions being made every year. So if you wanted scale, that was the way to go, at least at that point in time.
Yeah.
Technology evolves, right?
It does. Okay, let's get to some of the other cars at Geneva, or not Geneva. Volkswagen GTI. Bob, you want to start with that one?
Oh, give me a minute here. I'm just really, I was traveling all last week as these things were being rolled out, and so I really haven't studied everything that's been coming along here. But a new GTI is always a win. But this looks interesting. Looks like a different take.
Yeah, Steph, what are your thoughts?
It's familiar, and it's still familiar as well. It's interesting too. I think the GT5, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the GTI is the only one the US will see. So it's another theme that we've sort of noticed. I noticed in Geneva and Frankfurt and Paris in recent years too. The more and more introductions are regional, for lack of a better word, fewer and fewer global products. The GTI falls in that space. We've got a Mark 8 Golf that won't be in the US in the way that it has been before. We will still see the GTI. So I think that's an interesting element of the show. While we did talk about two concept cars, there were a lot of cars that were introduced that are specific to Europe. The GTI on paper looks pretty good, and that's an iconic car for them. They haven't always been successful with it, but they need to continue to be. And it's interesting too that alongside the GTI, they introduced the ID4 electric vehicle. So while VW has made no bones about the fact they're going electric, and that's very important, the GTI also reminds you that their internal combustion engine powertrains matter for a while longer.
Okay, Quiet Storm X just wrote in to say, I want the two-door back. You think two-door is going to make any mark, at least in the U.S. market?
But unlikely. I think that for the most part, U.S. buyers have really landed on the side of four doors. It's hard to find two doors anymore.
Yeah, I'm with Quiet Storm X. I like two doors, but they just don't sell. We're not selling the numbers that four doors do.
Yeah.
Hey, one thing about this new GTI is how much they've taken the leading edge of the hood down. It's really far more aerodynamic, or at least aerodynamic looking than it did in the past. It looks like all the radiator intake is at the bottom of the front fascia. Right. And what I'm intrigued by is now that front, apropos of our discussion about the big snout on the front of the BMW, this GT, even though it's got an internal combustion engine in it, is starting to look more like an electric. I think Volkswagen deliberately is starting to blend the design of the two.
Yeah, I'm glancing at the ID4 right now, and if we're able to pull up a picture of that, it's there you go. I mean, look at that similarity. I think it looks a little taller, but that's because it's maybe a larger, taller vehicle. But the commonality across that face is definitely there between the ICE and the electric.
I would agree.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too that ID4 as a utility vehicle, we should see that in the United States. And C-segment utility vehicles are a dime a dozen right now. Electric are going to be a dime a dozen, just like ICEs. And design-wise, I'm not quite sure how it's going to stand out in that space, just because that space is so crowded.
Right.
Hey, Bill Solomon wrote in talking about the joystick controls. He says they can be dual function. So when you're on long autonomous drives, you can play video games with them.
Yeah.
I
think we've seen how that works out.
Well, not at today's
So far.
level of autonomy, but I think he's right. In the future, you could do that.
Could be.
Mhm.
Okay. What about the Audi e-tron S? Steph, did you get a chance to look at that? What do you think?
Yeah, I looked at that a little bit, and I think that it's what's important to see there is that there's always consumers who want to go fastest and bestest, and this happens in the EV space as well. Obviously, Tesla has had ludicrous mode and their performance variants, and I think that the e-tron S is more a response to the fact that consumers, there is a buyer who wants to go faster than the guy next to him and is willing to pay for it. And that's true of whatever propulsion system you have under the hood. And that's where Audi is responding. And Audi is doing so in a way that's consistent with their heritage and with using the S and the RS names.
Yeah. Bob, your thoughts?
Why not just buy a Taycan? If you want limited range and lots of go, it seems like they're starting to maybe add, too many models in that space. But they did just announce that Audi technology is going to be leading the charge on their electrified work now, their electrified engineering. So I guess you need a halo. You need a high performance vehicle.
Yeah. I haven't heard any. Go ahead, Steph.
Nowadays, Halo is providing a halo for Audi, and Porsche's is for Porsche. I mean, VW has 13 brands. We're really worried about them overlapping in terms of space. They'd have a different.
I don't think the Taycan is going to compete against it simply from a price standpoint. I mean,
Well, yeah.
I know supposedly it starts at $180,000, but I know two guys that went to buy them. They said, try getting one for under $200,000. That's where the dealers are pricing them right now. And so I'm guessing, I don't know, an Audi e-tron S, probably about half the price of a Taycan.
Could be. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. At this point, it seems like if you're buying high performance electrification, you may be in a financial position where it doesn't really matter. You're
for sure.
Instead of buying a $250,000 Bentley, you're looking at your electrified second, third, fourth car.
Hey, you decided not to buy another vacation home.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And once again, to anybody who's watching, if you'd like to join the discussion, you're in the chat room. Just type in a question. We'd love to try to answer it if we can. Meanwhile, I don't know, Stephanie or Bob, if you guys saw, Audi also unveiled an A3 Sportback. I don't know if you've got any thoughts about that.
Glancing.
Yeah.
Coming with 48 volt plug-in versions, the whole shebang.
That's what the face of the A3 sedan will have when it comes here. And again, we still won't have the Sportback in the United States. First Sportback I really liked a lot, but Americans don't buy it quite so much. So we'll get a sedan version of this.
Yeah. And the one other car that I know that was unveiled today online because the Geneva show had been closed because of the coronavirus is the new E-Class Mercedes. And Stephanie, why don't we start with you again? Any thoughts on that car?
A big facelift and a big interior tear up in terms of adding the technology in the MBUX system. What Mercedes has been doing used to be that, the top technology came in at S-Class and filtered down. But for the last couple of generations of things, they're filtering technology in as fast as they can. In this particular case, it's a combination of the electrification of the powertrain and the infotainment MBUX system. So they said they've made some advancements to it, even from the last time we saw the MBUX. And that's where we're at with the E-Class. Basically a mid-cycle facelift, but all about technology and electrification.
Bob, anything to add?
Interesting that you're saying, Mercedes is using the E-Class. In some ways, this looks like they're bringing the A-Class styling and some of the technology they introduced in their base model up to, the big sedan.
Right. And what they used to do was start with S-Class and filter it down. And that has totally flipped on its head for Mercedes, especially for the infotainment side of things.
Yeah. Yeah. We got MBUX in the A-Class first, right? Yeah.
And it is a terrific system, actually.
Yeah.
What I'm interested in is Mercedes, for the first time in the US market, is introducing what they call an all-terrain version of the E-Class wagon, kind of like what Subaru had done with the Outback, raise it a little bit, black out the wheel lips, and Steph, what do you think? They got a chance with something like that?
It's slicing and dicing the niche of the market, and Volvo is doing that too with their their XC60 and XC90 sedans, I believe, or wagons. I think they are still. And what Volvo has done is made it pretty much an order only. So you do kind of limit your exposure to it, but it is a vehicle that should do better in Europe and other markets. Therefore, build a few and ship them over to the States and see how it goes.
Yeah, I studied the specs and tried to figure out what makes that an all-terrain vehicle, and it's
really loose.
and wheels, and it's not necessarily any kind of real off-road capability. It just looks the part.
Yep.
Okay, we've got a couple of more questions coming in from the audience. GTI guy wants to know, when are we going to see the reveal for the Grand Cherokee? Stephanie, you studied the future product. Any ideas on that?
That's a really good question. I don't have the answer. Should be sometime this year, but I will say FCA has been really strong in the last few years of holding down the reveals, and the reveals have come up 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks before production and before launch. Ram was at the Detroit show a couple of years ago and in production 4 or 5 weeks later. So they have pretty much skipped concept vehicles, and they keep their stuff under wraps until they're ready to sell it.
Bob, anything to add to that?
Sounds like the what we become used to with the Honda approach. We used to see what they called a prototype at the auto show, and you'd ask them, so when is this in production? And they go, oh, you'll see that in 4 months. It makes, I think it creates the feeling that you are much quicker at developing your vehicles. It went from prototype to production in 4 months or 5 weeks, or they revealed it and I can buy it tomorrow. That's amazing. So I think it makes it feel like they're maybe quicker than they are.
Yeah, I've often joked that Honda Concept cars are just production cars that have been lowered 1 inch and they take the rear view mirrors off.
Yeah.
And they call that a concept.
Big wheels on it, away you go.
Yeah. Like a computer, so you can't see the interior.
Yeah. Okay, we got another question from a viewer. Papa wants to know, when are we going to see the new Dodge Challenger and Charger? Is it going to happen before 2030?
We expect. You've got to remember, FCA is going through trying to merge with PSA. The merger isn't complete, won't be complete. If it is complete, won't complete until the end of 2020 or early 2021. And that could impact FCA in the longer term.
Yeah, I don't know what's happening with those kinds of vehicles going forward. Before 2030, if it doesn't show up before 2030, it's not going to show up ever. Although I gotta say, I appreciate Papa's bunny there. Happy Easter.
Hey, it's we're going to be coming up to
Spring.
Easter in a bit, you know.
Right. Yeah.
But
Happy
I
spring.
do know a little bit about the Charger and the Challenger. There is a new one coming. It's coming way before 2030. I want to say it's 2021 or 2022. You know, things have been delayed on that as FCA poured a bunch of money into Alfa Romeo, put a bunch of money into Maserati. They haven't seen much of a return on any of that. And there was going to be a newer version that was actually of the Charger and Challenger. It's supposed to be out last year. They were going to put it on the Giulia platform.
Right.
But the car's too big. That platform simply would not accommodate something as wide as the Charger and the Challenger are. And they didn't want to give up that interior room. So what Sergio Marchionne said before he passed away is that they were going to update the existing platform and keep that thing going. And, you know, even though sales of the 300, which is on the same platform, fell almost in half last year, Charger and Challenger are going great guns and they're making good money off that car. So I don't see it going away, but it's still going to be a couple of years before we see the new ones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree.
I was glancing around the room here trying to spot my FCA product chart, and I'm not sure where it went. It got buried behind something.
You got too much clutter on your desk there, Bob.
I got a lot of clutter going on here. There's a lot going on here.
FCA has done a fantastic job of keeping some older platforms down, giving them some moderate updates, giving them some heavy updates, and continuing to make money and plowing along. Challenger and Charger are good examples of cars that are selling pretty well for them, and they're making money.
Okay, more questions coming in. JKH70 wants to know, any electric vans for contractors like electric Sprinter or Transit?
Stay tuned.
They exist, don't they?
Exist. Yeah, and you know, Rivian's working with Amazon, so we'll see that. That isn't necessarily a contractor van, but yeah.
Yeah, there will be. Rivian, undoubtedly, even though they've got the Amazon contract, I'm sure they'll want to sell to others. You know, Lordstown Motors has shown a pickup. They got to be thinking about a van too. There will be others. But when you're going to see one from a major manufacturer, I don't know anything about that.
Well, let's, I believe GM is going to do some talking this week and
see what they think. Freightliner has an EV.
Let's see what they unveil. I suspect they're going to offer a whole range of ideas and concepts. See what sticks.
I mean, EVs have some opportunity in the commercial space on a smaller drive cycle, a lot of city, so you've got more regen in there. So we do expect it to happen. It's not happening necessarily as quickly as passenger cars, but there's opportunity there.
Hey, we've got a comment here, more of a comment than a question from Adam Henderson. He said Morgan was going to introduce the new Plus 4, but since the show was canceled, they drove it all the way back to Britain and posted some sneaky tweets about it. He says it was a fun reveal. Jeff Carroll wants to know, when are we going to actually see the reveal of the new Ford Bronco?
Coming up, isn't it?
It's later this month.
Yeah.
Oh, later this month.
We'll see it in March. Yeah, we are in March, right? Yeah.
Yeah. We're in March.
We'll see it in March.
So is that just going to be a reveal, or there's going to be a...
My understanding is it's an off-site reveal. The Bronco Sport, we should see at the New York show.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And
assuming
then
there's a New York show.
Go ahead.
Assuming there's a New York show, we'll see it. Yeah.
We might be doing this again during New York. Right.
I hope not. I really would rather go to a show. So.
Yeah. Dennis Lee wrote in to say, for what it's worth, he had a GLB 250 loaner for 3 weeks, and he said MB's UX is fantastic.
Yeah. I believe we've awarded it awards 10 Best User Experience Award right out of the gate in the A class.
Yeah.
Real good. Well, you know, we talked about all the cars that we know about. I think it's time to wrap this up. Stephanie Brinley, IHS Markit, Bob Gritzinger, Ward's Intelligence. I want to thank you guys today. Kind of interesting, you know, Geneva had to go to a virtual way of doing things. We're sort of doing the same thing here. Maybe this is the future of how we cover auto shows too.
Well,
Like you, Stephanie, I hope not.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking about it this morning as I was watching through the reveals too. They had to all scheduled on the same day. I mean, what if they went to reveals that were offline, that were virtual, scattered throughout the year? I mean, you still then, how do you then get enough people paying attention at the same time to be able to dedicate 3.5 hours to watching those this morning? So it's interesting as we move forward, but definitely, the fact that automakers, first of all, did respond very quickly with virtual reveals, and it's something they've been thinking about already. It's possible that this situation jumpstarts a little bit more change yet to come.
Bob, final thoughts?
I mean, as journalists, it makes it hard for us to chase down all these details, and you can't schedule interviews, and so you're doing everything oddly sort of offline, online. So we may miss that part of it, but I think that the people who are really looking at being aware of auto shows, the buying public, will tune in for long periods. We've seen in the past where you tweet in the middle of the night from an auto show somewhere, and people are picking up on it and following it. So there is that audience. We'll have to see how this develops going forward. I think, to Stephanie's point, they were already thinking about ways to do these sort of reveals and not have to do a physical event and bring a lot of people in. Yeah. We'll see it more going forward.
Yeah, Nicholas Shanks just wrote in to say, and I think he's talking about a past Chrysler reveal. He says, people pay attention when you smash the windows.
No. He's talking about the Cybertruck.
Oh, the Cybertruck. You're right.
Yeah.
I was thinking about when Chrysler drove a Jeep through a plate glass window.
Yeah,
but
that was fun, but I think this is much more recent.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
Hey, anyway, Stephanie, Bob, thanks for your time today. Thanks for sharing your thoughts on this new way of doing auto shows.
Yeah, very interesting.